رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء، حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم وعلى من غصب حقوقهم ومن شرك في ولايتهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. أما بعد، قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إن الله يرضى لرضاة فاطمة ويغضب لغضبها. صدق النبي وآمنا به. دوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. أحبائي, in the second Fatimiyya, we touched upon a certain line from within the khutbah of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, in where when she entered into Masjid al-Nabawi and delivered the khutbah fadaqiyah, she made a statement. And she said, O people, i'lamu anni Fatima. Know that I am Fatima. And we established in the last lecture that this was not a call in terms of recognize me for my biological relationship to my father. i'lamu anni Fatima, يعني have ma'rifah, i'lam, have ilm, have knowledge of who I, Fatima, who is Fatima, who am I? And building on this one line, we are able to understand that the hukum from an Aqidah perspective is the obligation to seek ma'rifah of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, to seek knowledge in regards to the status and the divinity of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam, and the message and the values for which she stood up for. This is the meaning of i'lamu. And i'lamu from a grammatical perspective, in its verbal tense, signifies a command tense. اعلموا يعني سيدة نساء العالمين is commanding the people to understand her status and to have ma'rifah of her grandeur. This is a responsibility that we have towards Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. But can anyone have an excuse and say it is optional to learn about Fatima al-Zahra? If we understand this, today I want to build on one aspect of the grandeur of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Ruhi al-Fida. And this is tying a number of hadith together to get to our matlab, to get to our conclusion. And the journey of istidlal is extremely sweet and pleasurable to the heart. Shufu, we have a hadith that emanates from the Holy Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajah, where the Nabi states, Fatima ruhi bayna jambay. Fatima is the soul between my sides. Fatima is the soul in my chest. This has a similar connotation to what Rasulullah said in regards to Sayyid al-Shuhada. Hussein minni wa ana min al-Hussein. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. It has a similar connotation where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ayatul Mubahala says, Anfusana wa anfusakum. Yani nafsun nabi amirul mu'minin. Over here, Rasulullah says, Ruhi Fatima. Yani Ruhun Nabi Fatima alayhi salam. Which means there are certain, if Fatima is the Ruh alayhi salam of Rasulullah, there are certain elements and characters of Rasulullah that resonate and shine out from Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. So for example, if Sayyidah al-Zahra is the Ruh of Rasulullah, and the Rasulullah, as per the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We did not send you except as a mercy towards mankind. And if Sayyidah Fatima is the Ruh of the Nabi, yani Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is Rahmatan lil-Alameen. Sayyidah Zahra is a mercy from Allah towards mankind in general and towards the Shia in particular. An example of the mercy that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is to mankind. A gift from Allah to creation. This is understood, the mercy of Fatima alayhi salam, and the fact that she is one of the grandest ni'mas, mercies and bounties of Allah upon creation. This can be understood from the azamah and the grandeur of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Because if we understand what the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is, on one hand, you will understand the grandness of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the divinity of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, and on the other hand, you will understand what a great mercy and bounty that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is to creation. Through the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. And we begin with this, and inshallah with this there is shawq, and there is a willingness in the heart, and there is inshallah this excitement and ma'rifah the next time we pick up a tasbih to recite the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. شوفوا hadith in regards to the grandeur of the tasbih of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. Tasbihat al-Zahra is a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal that Rasulullah gave to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Tasbihat al-Zahra has 100 dhikr inside of it. 34 times Allahu Akbar, 33 times Alhamdulillah, and 33 times Subhanallah. What is the value of this tasbih of Sayyidati Nisa al-Alameen? شوفوا الحديث. حديث الشريف in Kitab al-Kafi from Kitab al-Salat on authority of Imam Ja'far ibn Mohamed as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa Panju. Pay attention to the speaker of the hadith, the narrator of the hadith. Hadith is emanating from who? Imam Sadiq. Imam Sadiq, our entire madhab is named behind Imam Sadiq, Ja'fari, yani the leader of the madhab. When we say leader of the madhab, yani the manifestation of the true deen of Tawheed and implementation of Tawheed through Furu'ud-Din is Imam Sadiq. So when Imam Sadiq speaks about an act of worship, man is supposed to be at full alert. Sahih or no? Look at what Imam Sadiq says. تسبيح فاطمة عليها السلام كل يوم في دبر كل صلاة أحب إلي من صلاة 1000 ركعة في كل يوم. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says that the recitation of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra after every salat is more loved to me. Imam Sadiq, who is Hujjatullah fil Ard, is saying the recitation of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra after every salat to me is more beloved than the recitation of 1000 rak'ah nafila recited on a daily basis. One tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra after a wajib salat or a mustahab salat is more beloved to Imam Sadiq than the actual physical recitation of 1000 rakat of salat. In the words of the great Ayatollah Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani, may Allah Azza wa Jal lengthen his life and prolong the life of all our virtuous ulama and baraja. Sheikh Ayatollah Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani had said this a number of years ago in one of his lectures. He said, let us analyze this hadith of Imam Sadiq. The tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is better than 1000 rak'ah. Let us analyze this. If a person was to recite 1000 rak'ahs, in every rak'ah, on the assumption, in every rak'ah, he recites Surah Al-Hamd and Surah Al-Ikhlas. If you recite in 1000 rak'ahs, in every rak'ah, Surah Al-Ikhlas once, yani you have recited Surah Al-Ikhlas how many times? 1000 times. Sahih. We also have within our hadith that if you recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times, you get the thawab of the completion of an entire Quran. So if you recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times, you get the thawab of completing the entire Quran, Khatmul Quran. So if you were to recite 1000 rak'ahs with 1000 Surah Al-Ikhlas in them, at the end of the day, in addition to the thawab of 1000 rak'ahs, you get the thawab of approximately completing the Quran how many times? 1000 divided by 3, 333 times. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says this one tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is better than the completion of 333 Khatmul Qur'ans. A Khatmul Qur'an is not easy to recite the entire Qur'an. Maybe a person in his life once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, maybe once every year. Once those who recite and complete the Quran every Shahr Ramadan know the level of discipline that is required to recite 1 juz a day. It's discipline. 303 Khatmul Qur'ans is better. Imam Sadiq said the tasbih is better. 1 tasbih takes how long to say the tasbih after Salatul Maghrib and Salatul Isha. If you understand this, the Fatima al-Zahra, mercy towards mankind, Lola. Now, if 1 tasbih is better than 333 Khatmul Qur'an, if a person was to recite the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra after every salat, yani 5 salat, in every salat your tasbih is better than 333 Khatmul Qur'an. So 333 times 5 is how much? Over 1,500 Khatmul Qur'ans in a single day. The Malaika write the thawab for you on the barakah and on the name of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. For a person who gets the thawab of 1,500 Khatmul Qur'an on a daily basis, how difficult must it be for him to enter into Jahannam? And I give you something which is even more khayali, something that is even more difficult to comprehend. See, Hadith al-Sharif says that Sayyidah Zahra alayha salam, her tasbih, her rosary, it used to be made from a string of wool. And she would tie knots on this string of wool, such that each knot would be equivalent to a bead, and she would have 100 of these beads. And this is how she would do her tasbih. Until the time of the Shahada of Sayyid al-Shuhada and Asadullah, Sayyid Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of Rasulullah. And he became Shaheed in the Battle of Uhud. Upon his martyrdom, when Rasulullah buried Imam Hamza in the plains of Uhud, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam would go to the grave of Sayyid Hamza, from what I remember in the traditions, every Tuesday and every Thursday. She would go and she would sit at the grave of Imam Hamza and she would recite Quran. And upon the martyrdom of Sayyid Hamza, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra took a handful of dust from the grave of Sayyid Hamza and made a tasbih out of the soil of the qabr of this great Shaheed. And from this point onwards, from the Battle of Uhud onwards, it became a norm and it became the trend that people would make rosaries from the earth of the grave of Sayyid Hamza. Because the action of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is a hujjah upon mankind. Inna Allah yarda li ridati Fatima. Allah is pleasured with the pleasure of Fatima. So if Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra performs an action, it means it's from the pleasure of Allah. She becomes a hujjah. So the Muslimin followed in this. During the time of Rasulullah, until his martyrdom, at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, at the time of Imam Hassan, at the time of Imam al-Husayn. It is only until the battle and the tragedy of Karbala that the Shias then began making rosaries from the soil or the turba of the grave of Imam al-Husayn, as opposed to the grave of Hamza alayhi salam. So it is mustahab to make a rosary out of the turba of Imam al-Husayn. Now, what happens when you recite the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra using the turba from the grave of her son Imam al-Hussein. Do not look at the tasbih as an act of ibadat. Look at the tasbih as an act of wilayah. The tasbih is a tasbih of Zahra, but the rosary is the rosary from the grave of the son of Zahra. Shufu, Hadith al-Sharif, narrated by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, says, أن من أدارها مرة واحدة بالاستغفار أو غيره كتب الله له 70 مرة. Imam Sadiq, this is part of a hadith. He says, if you were to use a rosary made from the grave of Imam al-Hussein, if you were just to move your fingers, the beads, without reciting anything, for every bead moved by your finger, there is thawab written for you. And if a person was to do istighfar with the turba, the rosary from the turba of Imam al-Hussein, for every astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh recited, you get the ajr of doing 70 istighfar. Imam Sadiq goes on to say, not only is the istighfar recorded or multiplied times 70, any dhikr that is done with the rosary from the turba of Imam al-Hussein is rewarded 70 times over. Which means that if a person used the regular rosary to perform the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the thawab is greater than 333 Khatmul Qur'ans. But if you recite the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra using the tasbih or the rosary from the turba of Imam al-Hussein, the reward is 70 times more, meaning 333 times 70 Khatmul Qur'ans. Yani, I did the math over here. One tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra using the rosary from the grave of Imam al-Hussein is better than 23,000 Khatmul Qur'an. The reward is not because of what we recited. The reward is because of the wilayah to who the rosary, the dust of that rosary belongs, and the dhikr in the name of that lady whose this tasbih belongs to. Can you imagine the happiness and the thawab that would reach our marhumin if a person was to recite one tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra using the turba of Imam al-Hussein and give the thawab to their marhumin? Imagine sitting at the grave of a marhum and completing the entire Quran 23,000 times. This is possible through the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra and the turba of Imam al-Hussein. Is this not a manifestation of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This rahmah is manifested through this tasbih of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. Aywa. Second hadith, hadith al-Sharif, again, on the importance of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And through the tasbih of Sayyidah Zahra, you understand the wilayah of Sayyidah Zahra. Because the one who abides by the tasbih, who complies by the tasbih, in essence, this compliance by the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is a manifestation of your compliance to the wilayah of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Shufu hadith al-Sharif. This is recorded in Wasa'il al-Shia on authority of Imam Mohamed ibn Ja'far, or on authority of Imam Mohamed ibn Ali al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. اللهم صل على محمد من سبح تسبيح الزهراء ثم استغفر غفر له. Number 1. وهي 100 باللسان و1000 في الميزان. Number 2. وتطرد الشيطان. Number 3. Number 4. وترضي الرحمن. He says 4 benefits of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The Imam says, Man sabbaha tasbih al-Zahra, the one who recites the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, thumma istaghfar, upon completing the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, and then he seeks forgiveness. Ghufira lah, he is forgiven. Meaning what? The prerequisite to tawbah, the prerequisite to a person's istighfar being accepted is the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. This means the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is a demonstration of the wilayah of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, meaning that the wilayah of Zahra alayha salam is a prerequisite to istighfar and the maghfirah from Allah. If we understand this, one of the biggest a'mal that we do in Laylatul Qadr is astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh. You understand in this hadith that if you are on a journey to seek forgiveness for the sins that you have committed in life, and you want to wrong or you want to correct the wrongs that you have done in your previous years, the starting point of istighfar is the tasbih and the wilayah of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Istighfar has conditions. From here we understand one of the conditions of istighfar is the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima. And then he goes on to say, وَهِيَ 100 بِاللِّسَانِ وَأَلْفٌ فِي الْمِيزَانِ. It is only 100 recitations by the tongue, but it is equivalent to 1,000 good deeds in the mizan. Who understands the mizan better? The mizan is the scale on the day of judgment. You know who understands the reality of the word mizan? The person who is getting buried. Because in the talqeen, you say, wal mizanu haq. This dead person who is now being lowered into the grave, into his final abode, and is finally starting to realize that, Baba, the door of my a'mal are closed, finished. The time of sowing the seeds is gone. Now I'm going to reap what I sowed in my dunya. You and I as living people don't understand the weight of the word mizan or haq. Because we are alive, we take it for granted. The one who has died has understood the meaning of mizan. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam says, the people are dead while they are alive. And when they are dead is when they truly become alive. Because when we are alive, we are in a state of ghafla, spiritually are dead. Nobody care about accountability and halal and haram and mizan and haq and batil. Everyone is involved in the dunya. This ghafla, Amir al-Mu'minin says, is like a state of death. But when you die, yani the soul comes out of the body. This is when now the soul is fully awake and alert. And it is at this time, Imam goes on to say, one of the most anxious times, on the day of judgment, there are many stages, equivalent to 50,000 years. There are many stages of the day of judgment. And in these many stages of the day of judgment, there is the nashar, coming out of the grave, and then there is being put into lines of ummahs, depending on which imam you believed in. And then after that, there is the sirat. And then after that, there is the mizan. And within the mizan, then there is tatayur al-qutub. Tatayur al-qutub is when the scroll of beads are presented. And in this entire journey, the human being will go through so many different emotions. You can imagine the first emotion is just being raised back from the grave. And from that graveyard being assembled into this wide plain. And everyone is being aligned, put into ranks and lines. Every line is depending on which Imam you followed in the dunya. There are those who claim to be the lovers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, but their hearts are with the leaders of Saqifa. Have been put in the line of, that's your Imam, go. One of the stages of excitement and nervousness and tension, and if you can imagine at the back of your mind, the closest example or a relative example. If you remember, when you're in high school and you're waiting for these final exam results that will now denote whether you enter into university or not. Or you've done a critical medical exam and you're waiting for a result to come out and you don't know which way that result is going to swing. You don't know whether your exams you're going to pass and go into university. On the day of when you're going to get the results, how anxious do you feel? How anxious do you feel? You don't know what's going to happen. If you could multiply that anxiousness by maybe 1 billion times over, the human being will find this or experience this anxiousness when his deeds are being placed on the mizan, on the scale. And you look at the bad deeds and the sins piling and piling and piling and tilting the scales, and you are waiting for that one thawab to come there and tilt the scales in its entirety. Imam al-Baqir says this dhikr, which is 100 easy dhikr on the tongue, is equivalent to 1,000 on that mizan. This one tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is enough to tilt the mizan and send the person into Jannah. The third benefit of the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is from this hadith, وَتَطْرُدُ الشَّيْطَانِ. The tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra dispels the shaitan. Tatrudu shaitan over here, according to the ulama, has a number of meanings. Number one, person who suffers from constant waswasa. The cure for waswasa, in addition to being in wudu, one of the cures and perhaps the strongest, most effective of cures is the recitation of the tasbih of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alamin. One. Number two, tatrudu shaitan, meaning that the ability to resist against temptation. Sometimes you notice that the temptation to sin is so sweet that there is no power of resistance within the heart. The minute a chance to do something harm comes in front of you, you jump towards it. There is no resistance. There is no internal power that holds you back. There is nothing to dispel that temptation of shaitan. How does a person build the strength of resistance against shaitan? This is tatrudu shaitan, the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. This is one. Number two, tatrudu shaitan, meaning that not only do you have the power of resistance, because power of resistance means what? You see something which is tempting in front of you. You see something which is exciting in front of you. Something that is luring you. It's a temptation. You know it's haram. It's sweet in front of you. But you have a power of resistance. Correct? This is one. This is one stage. Another stage is what? Tatrudu shaitan, meaning that when a person can reach a level that when sin is presented in front of him, that sin is not tempting anymore. The person has reached a level of spiritual ma'rifah and conditioned the ruh to such a level that he's actually able to see the ugliness of the sin for what it is. So it doesn't even come across as tempting to him. He doesn't even need the power of resistance inside of him, because he's able to see the ugliness for what it really is. How does a person get to the stage of yaqeen and iman and irfan? Tatrudu shaitan, through the tasbih of Sayyidati Nisa al-Alam. And the last one that the Imam says from here, وَتُرْضِي الرَّحْمَنِ. The tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Turdi al-Rahman, seeks the rida and the pleasure of Allah. This word is very interesting. Turdi al-Rahman. The derivative of this word, yani rida. If you recite the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Ruhi laha al-Fida, you secure the rida, the pleasure and the happiness of Allah. What is the meaning of rida? And what is the status of a person who has reached the level of rida? To understand this, you come back to the Quran. In the surah of Imam al-Hussein in the Quran, Surah al-Fajr, yani Surah al-Hussein, alayhi salam. Ya ayyatuha nafs al-mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. Or nafs that has reached this level of itmi'nan, nafs al-mutma'inna, return back to your Lord. Radiyatan, radiyatan, return back to your Lord while you are pleased with him and your Lord is pleased with you. So how do you get to the stage of nafs al-mutma'inna, where you are pleased with your Lord and your Lord is pleased with you? Through the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, because Imam al-Baqir says that this tasbih turdi al-Rahman, meaning that if you are on a spiritual journey for seeking taqwa and reaching the level of nafs al-mutma'inna, your starting point is the tasbih of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. So you find that this tasbih is a tasbih of aqidah. This tasbih is a tasbih of wilayah. This is a tasbih of rahmah. If there is any chance to become nafs al-mutma'inna through the tasbih of Fatima, prerequisite to istighfar, tasbih of Fatima, mizan to be tilted, tasbih of Fatima, Khatm al-Quran in the thousands, tasbih Fatima. Fatima is a mercy of Allah towards mankind. Inshallah, with this, we are all motivated to comply by the tasbih of Sayyidati Nisa al-Alameen. And from here, if you are able to understand the philosophy of this tasbih, for what it represents, and it is a symbolism of the wilayah, then the next step is to delve into the meaning of the tasbih. What is the meaning of the word Allah, or the phrase Allahu Akbar? The meaning of the phrase Alhamdulillah, and the meaning of the phrase Subhanallah, such that when a person recites the tasbih, the impact on the soul is greater and greater, and the impact on his wilayah is also greater and greater. Hopefully this we have for another time, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ahibai, the third Fatimiyya, commemorating the martyrdom and the oppression of this great lady. And like we said, Sayyidah Zahra was a gift of Allah to humanity, to mankind. But how did mankind treat this gift of Allah? For tonight's Messiah, today, for some reason, my heart kept pulling me back to Sham. For some reason. And I said to myself, perhaps tonight is a night of musibah, where the oppressed daughter in Sham and the masa'ib of the oppressed daughter of Rasulullah come together. And this masa'ib is based on the words of one poet, where he describes Sayyidah Ruqayya. He describes Sayyidah Ruqayya by calling her Shabihatul Zahra. Yani Sayyidah Ruqayya was the Shabih. She was the Shabih of her grandmother, Sayyidah Fatima. How do we say that Ali al-Akbar was the Shabih of Rasulullah? He was similar to Rasulullah. Sayyidah Ruqayya was similar to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And if you understand this, there are many similarities in the masa'ib and the tragedies that happened upon Sayyidah Ruqayya and happened on Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. This masa'ib is a comparison on the tragedies and the trials and the tribulations of Sayyidah Ruqayya. A comparison between the tragedy of Sayyidah Ruqayya and that of her grandmother Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Allah, both of them were oppressed in many similar manners. The narrations mention that on Sham-e Ghariban, the enemies came running towards the tents of Ahlul Bayt. Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in cried out, Ihriqu darul khawarij. He said, Ihriqu the tents, Ihriqu khiyam al-khawarij. They came forward in their horses, in their hundreds. Umar ibn Sa'ad cried out, burn the tents of the Khawarij. They lit the tents of the women of Ahlul Bayt on fire. Sayyidah Kulthum says, as soon as they lit the tents on fire, the women began to run in every direction. The women began to run. The Maktal mentions that the little children, Sayyidah Ruqayya, was choking from the black smoke of the burning. Allah. In the manner that Sayyidah Ruqayya was choking from the burning tents in Sham-e Ghariban. Over here on the day of Saqifa, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra says, when Ibn Khattab lit my door on fire, I was crushed between the door and the wall. Sayyidah Zahra says, the black smoke from the burning door, I was not able to breathe. Sayyidah Zahra says, I was choking from the burning door. Allah. The tragedies that happened on the day of Saqifa that opened the doors of the tragedy of Karbala. Ba'ad. Sayyidah Ruqayya says that from Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham, every time I cried for my father, I would be slapped on my face. Sometimes Shimmer would slap me, sometimes Khuli would slap me. Allah. They say they slapped this daughter to such a manner that when Sayyid al-Sajidin was burying Sayyidah Ruqayya, he kissed the cheeks of Sayyidah Ruqayya, but these are cheeks that were swollen from the slap. Allah. In the same manner that Sayyidah Ruqayya was slapped over here on the day of Saqifa. The narrations mention that when Ibn Khattab kicked open the door and they barged into the house, the Umar ibn Khattab slapped Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra across the face in a manner. Hudayfa says that the way he slapped her, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra's eye was bruised and swollen until the day of her death. Allah. Do you know one of the similarities between Sayyidah Ruqayya and Sayyidah Zahra? The narrations mention that every time they slapped Sayyidah Ruqayya would look up at the spear on which her father's head was. She would then cry out, Abata, oh my father, come and help me. In the manner that Sayyidah Ruqayya called out, oh my father. The narrations mention that when Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra was crushed between the door and the wall, she cried out, Abata ya Rasulallah. Oh my father, oh Rasulallah, come and see how the Ummah has treated me upon your martyrdom. Allah. Tragedy between Sayyidah Zahra and Sayyidah Ruqayya. The narrations mention that between Karbala and Sham, between Karbala and Kufa to Sham, the army of Yazid was in a hurry to reach to Sham. So they would force the women to walk at speeds that were absolutely fast through the desert. The women would not be able to keep up. If any one of the women and the children fell, there was a time that Sayyidah Ruqayya fell down. She was not able to keep up with the camels. So when she fell down, Shivar al-La'in whipped Sayyidah Ruqayya across the back and the shoulder. Sayyidah Zainab comes running and she hugs Sayyidah Ruqayya. She says to Shivar al-La'in, do you not see the child may die out of hunger and thirst? She is not able to walk, and on top of that you whip her on her back. How many times Sayyidah Ruqayya was whipped, I don't know. But the Maktal does mention that when they were burying this daughter of Imam al-Hussein, her entire back was full of cuts and full of bruises because of the manner in which she was whipped. And in the same manner, the shoulder and the back of her grandmother, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The narrations mention that as soon as they kicked down the burning door, Umar ibn Khattab slapped Sayyidah Zahra. He kicked her in the stomach and then he hit her with the blade of his sword on the shoulder. The narration mentions after that Kunfudullah came. Kunfud took out a whip and he lashed it across the back and the shoulder of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. The tragedy of Sayyidah Ruqayya and Sayyidah Zahra. For when you go to heaven, show your bruises to your father and your grandfather, Rasulullah. Fatima. अदादारों पहली बार तब जब काफिला यसीरानी आले मोहम्मद शाम के बाजार में हुआ। अदादारों मेरे पाक सैयदा ने अपने भैया हुसैन को सदा दे के कहा, भैया हुसैन देखो मैं अली की बेटी बाजार में अपनी सर खड़ी हूँ। अदादारों बस दूसरी बार तब जब मेरे पाक इमाम सज्जाद सरे हुसैन लेके जिंदान के पास आए। अदादारों सकीना कमीज दीवार से टकराती थी। अदादारों सकीना कमीज दीवार से टकराती और दोनों में सदा दे के कहती, भैया सज्जाद मुझे अपने बाबा के सर की खुशबू आ रही है, मुझे अपने बाबा के सर की खुशबू आ रही है। बस अदादारों पाक बीबी सकीना ने अपने बाबा हुसैन का सर अपनी गोद में रखा। अदादारों अपनी गोद में रख के पाक बीबी ने अपनी बाबा से कलाम किया, बाबा हुसैन, बाबा आंखें खोलो, देखो अपनी सकीना को पहचानो, बाबा मैं तुम्हारी सकीना हूँ। बाबा जालिमों ने मुझ पे इतने जुल्म किए, बाबा जालिमों ने इतने जुल्म किए, मेरी आंखों की बीनाई चली गई। अदादारों पाक बीबी ने तड़प के अपने बाबा हुसैन से बयान किया, वो सुन के पाक बीबी को गुस्सा दे, मुझे बालों से पकड़ कर तमाचे मारे, मुझे बालों से पकड़ कर तमाचे मारे, मैंने सर से मांगा जो तुम्हारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपकी बात मौला तुम्हें हिम्मत दे कि पाक बीबी का ये मसाइब सुन सको। अदादारों पाक बीबी ने अपने बाबा का सर अपनी झोली में रखा। अदादारों मौला हुसैन ने
زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب عشق زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا عشق محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن عشق حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر عشق حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين عشق محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن يا محسن عشق زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا عشق مهدي يا مهدي يا مهدي يا مهدي يا مهدي يا مهدي يا صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله